Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Please do keep your videos on if you can. So today's session is going to be a tad different from the usual format. Usual format is we have, hang on, I have a message, I don't know. Okay, yeah. The usual format is where we have a didactic, which is followed by the case, and then we have a vibrant discussion around the case, and then we kind of close at 5:30. But we thought that we have completed a logical chapter, let's put it that way, which is about leadership, about perception, about neuroplasticity, neurosculpting. So all those elements, automatic negative thoughts and so on, all the elements which go towards rising or raising our self-awareness. From here onwards, we are going to get into the enrich part of it, or the practical aspects of how do I take that elevated level of self-awareness and put it to work in my professional as well as my personal life. So the things we will focus on will be how do I find my purpose, what is flow and how do I find it, how do I improve my interpersonal relationships, how do I increase my ability to work within a team, how do I manage my time, how do I manage stress, and so on. So those are all the elements which we will be discussing as we go forward. So we thought it will be a fairly good place where we can have a recap of what we have done in the last 6 sessions, which will take us 30 minutes to quickly run through all of that, and maybe spend 30 minutes on today's didactic, which is purpose and flow. Then move on to having a discussion for the last 30 minutes. That is how we have planned it. Yeah. So if you recall, we started the self-empowerment program, which is the whole umbrella program, and we broke it into 3 parts. The first part was what is called enrich. Enrich was really to raise self-awareness and work on specific areas of self-development. The second was saying, okay, if I've raised my level of self-awareness and got myself doing a certain amount of self-development, how do I truly excel and bring out the full potential and thrive in whatever I am doing, which is about maximizing my potential, both personal as well as professional. Then comes the part, which is the last 6-month program, which will be on what is called embody, which is where we are a walking, talking person in evolution, or a neurosculptor work in progress, a neurosculptor in progress, in action. Yeah. So those are the 3 parts to it. And we are right now in the enrich part, which will take us another 6 sessions before we finish enrich. That's where we are. Now, in enrich, we talked about 4 steps that are there in mind training. What are those steps? The first one is an awareness and recognition of the fact that there is something which needs change, and that there is always something which needs change. There is always something which needs improvement in every person. Then we try and understand it in a properly neuroscientific manner. We know something is not going right, something is not working out, I wish it was better, and so on. These are all very nebulous ideas or things which we have in our head. How do we bring that into a greater level of understanding, and understanding it properly scientifically? The third, which is a key element of both Yogakshema and Echo, which is relating that to our situation as school leaders, as people who are heads of primary school, secondary school, the full school, and so on, or people who are groomed for leadership positions. How do we relate to that particular situation? How do we make it contextual? The level of self-awareness and the understanding which we have, how do we make it contextual? And that's where the case study really comes into play, where we are able to relate to a certain situation which we are going through in our school or in our personal life and relate it to that particular situation. And finally, what do I do about it, which is really the tools and the practices, where we have spoken about a few tools. Of course, we will talk in much greater detail. For instance, when we did perception, we did speak about a tool called mindfulness, but we briefly talked about mindfulness. During Excel, we'll be dedicating one full session just for mindfulness itself as to what it means. And there are many aspects which we haven't covered, which we will be covering as we go forward. Now, this is where we are. If you look at our curriculum, it was a 4 sessions, and we have already done leadership and the 4 critical aspects of understanding through neuroscience: our brain, mind, neuroplasticity, the belief systems, which is about our values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes, then action acceptance choices. Then we spend some time in terms of what is our perception, how do we change our perception, do we always form the right perception? If not, why not? What is stopping us from forming the right kind of perception of a situation? All of that. And finally, last session, we went through the automatic negative thoughts. What are the different types of automatic negative thoughts? How do I catch those negative thoughts when I'm getting them? The reason why we need to get it into a certain kind of a structure is because one is our understanding. So the next time around, when there is a perceptual difference, next time around, we realize that we are very hardened in our belief system. Next time around, when we are going through an automatic negative thought, we are able to place it inside our head and say, this is what I'm going through, and I'm not alone, and I'm not the only person who's going through it. Everybody goes through it. Now I have a framework, I have a structure in which I can think about it. And once I'm able to think about it, then with the tools and practices, then I can correct it and change it. And those tools and practices we know. And what we have to do is we have to take advantage of the neuroplasticity and concepts like that. Going forward is about the self-development areas. One is there'll be a section for 3 sessions on self-empowerment, which will be on what is a purpose, how do we find it, what is flow, how do we find it. Second, we'll do time management and general management skills. We plan to spend a lot more time on this in Excel, but just the most important things in terms of when we are always scrambling for time, how do I get my life in order in terms of my time management so that one can become a lot more organized with the time available? More importantly, how can one become more productive with the time available? Third is in terms of stress. Everybody goes through stress. But with some of us, the stress is far more common, far more frequent, far more intense. How do we understand that? How do we address that? Stress management. Then critical thinking in an information loaded world. Gone are the days when we wanted a small little thing to even find out what are the 7 wonders of the world. We had to walk 2 kilometers to a library to actually find out what the 7 wonders of the world are. Or our teacher told us what the 7 wonders of the world are, and we assumed and believed that particular teacher. Not anymore. We don't need that. We can always find out what the 7 wonders of the world are in less than 10 seconds. But then the fact is, we do keep getting different things through WhatsApp and social media and internet and newspapers and everywhere else. How do we improve our critical thinking in an information surplus world? Then finally, trust, empathy, and teamwork and communication skills. How do we become an effective communicator? Why do we need all these things? The reason why we need all these things is because if we are in leadership positions or we are getting groomed to take on leadership positions, these are qualities of a good flexible leader. A good flexible leader has a very clear sense and idea of what their purpose is and what flow is. Good leaders do strong, very good time management and general management skills and stress management and so on. And this is something we have sort of seen it over and over and over again. And it was deliberate to put it in every single session, in the pre-session and everywhere, so that we get this inside ourselves of saying, if we want to be a solid, flexible leader, there are 3 types of flexibility which we need to be able to show. The first one is our flexibility in cognition, our ability to adapt in our thought process, in our cognition, the cognitive flexibility which we are able to show. And that goes towards how do we build a vision. A vision has got really three elements in it. First, it is about our ability to imagine a future. That future is never clear. That future is not certain. The future is ambiguous. Through a thick forest with one eye closed with the fog lights on. That's how leadership is. So it's not new. So we can't say that I don't fully know what the future is going to be. How do you ask me to build a vision? You know what? We are a leader and we are supposed to build that vision in that kind of a dark night with fog lights on with one eye closed. Second, we don't want to set ambitions for ourselves. It has been proven in many empirical studies that people who set a goal which is way beyond anything which is possible and come back achieving 70% of the goal create a much greater achievement than people who set goals which are easy and come out at 110% of it. You can set a goal of 20 and be at 22, which is 110% of 20. That's still 22. But you can set a goal of 100, which is a ridiculous goal, and then reach 70% of it, which is still 70. So 70 is way bigger than the 22, and that's how stretch goals work. Never set ourselves an ambition, which is an ambition which can be achieved. The only downside of setting a stretch goal is that we are very unlikely to achieve it ever, which means failure is something which we have to embrace as we go forward, as a leader. Third, it's all okay to know where I want to go. It's okay to know where I am. How will I go from where I am to where I want to go? I know my point of departure. I know my point of arrival. How will I go from my point of departure to my point of arrival? That is strategy. Right? A granular part of strategy is what is called a plan, and a plan has much more timeline. Strategy doesn't have that much of timeline. Strategy also has timelines, but not that much like a plan. So strategy, plan, and all of those things, we will talk about that in Excel in a greater detail. Then it's about the emotional flexibility, or how do we bring about the alignment within our team. We can't do everything. We spoke about that. As a leader, I can't do everything. The others are unlikely to do it as well as I can, but I'm still responsible for the actions of my team. If that is going to be the case, I have to create very good alignment within my team, which is about communication, which is about listening, and most importantly, about the empathy we are able to show. Because whenever there is change which is happening, there is somebody else is just going through the change. A lot of other people are going through change, and it can be quite stressful. And to be able to empathize with that particular thing and be able to listen to their complaints and so on, and still have the emotional stamina to be able to go forward. And the third is the dispositional or the motivational flexibility. In motivation, it's really about the energy. Okay, a simple test is when somebody comes into an interaction with you and they go back after that interaction, are they going back at an energy level which is higher than when they started the conversation? If that is the case, then you are able to provide energy to people. Otherwise, we are draining energy of people. Optimism, a general sense of cheer, a can-do attitude, leading by example, getting our hand and our feet fully muddied is all very important. Just the sheer amount of energy is important for a flexible leader. Oops, in the process of, Now, what is neuroplasticity? We will just go through this video. We have gone through this in the past.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
Right. So that in a nutshell is what neuroplasticity is. Okay, that we form new connections. We did go through the Dalai Lama and the neuroscientists collaborating, and Dalai Lama posing a couple of questions to the neuroscientists, and the neuroscientists coming back and saying, maybe it is like this, it is like that. But the most important thing is that two very different fields were able to collaborate and be able to come up with saying that, can I really change my brain through my thought, with my actions, and with my feelings, right? And it was proven that it is possible, not just possible at any one age, it is possible all through our life till our last breath. We can change our thoughts, change our brain. We can change our feelings and change our brain, or we can change our behavior. And importantly, we can change our action, and that can change our brain. Right? That is what neuroplasticity in a nutshell is. Neuroplasticity is probably one of the most empowering tools, because we know that no matter what it is, in terms of perception and hands and so on and so forth, irrespective of what it is in our brain, in our mind, we know it is possible to change. And that is a very, very empowering statement. And the person who can change it, who can control it, is ourselves. Now, quickly, about the four sessions which we had. The first one we had was in terms of what is a value, what is a belief, what are morals, and what's an attitude. Right? Where we said values are something which is very important to us. Morals and beliefs, they're things which we think is the right way to go about doing things. Attitude is how we behave. Now, it is not important what our values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes are. Okay, to some extent, it might be important as to what our attitude will be. To some extent, it might, but it's not that important exactly what our values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes are. But it is first to recognize that there is no universality of values, beliefs, morals, and attitude. So the next time we make an emphatic statement on what is right and what is not right, we should be able to come back and ask ourselves the question, am I having a hardened idea about my values, beliefs, morals, and attitude? Because it's very, very different for different socio-economic, emotional, education, experiential backgrounds. Very, very different, very different. Yeah? So we can go on and talk endlessly about how different cultures, and even within the same culture, which more or less we are all from the same culture, even within the same culture, it's very different for people coming from different socioeconomic, emotional, and educational backgrounds, and people who have gone through different experiences. So the dissonance which we have in our interpersonal relationship, whether it is with our family or with our colleagues, is not so much because I have a hard values, beliefs, morals, and attitude. I have it so hard that I'm unwilling to accept a different value, belief, morals, and attitudes. And that is where the problem comes, that we are unwilling to accept. So we don't have to change. We don't have to believe in whatever they are saying, but we should be able to accept and say, I understand that you're going through, you have a different set of values, beliefs, morals, and attitude, which might or might not be mine, but it's that understanding and acceptance. It's not accepting that value, but accepting the person and that particular situation or that particular society or that particular group or that family, right? Just the recognition of it and realization of the non-universality will make a great change in ourselves, because we will be able to accept people in a much better way going forward. Also, our expectation from other people reduce and the focus is redirected to ourselves. That's really what we want, isn't it? Neuroplasticity is about working on ourselves to become better every day, every hour, every moment. That is what it is. It's not about changing the society, about changing the family. It's not about changing anybody else. But changing ourselves is highly empowering as well. Then we said, okay, everybody and anything, then do I just have to keep going and expect nothing out of this world? Of course not. Of course not. That will be a very foolish thing to say. That's where we said there are this very, very awesome prayer, which is the Serenity Prayer, which is, God, give me the serenity to things I can't change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that wisdom is the key element, because we don't want to be accepting things we can change, or we don't want to be fighting and trying to change things we can't change, but getting the wisdom is the most important thing. So it is a bit of a yin and yang here. There is a part which is inevitable, which we have to accept with serenity, and there are things which are optional, where we have to act with courage. That's really where the core philosophy of Yogashamma, which is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. There are elements which are inevitable, there are elements which are optional. And what divides the two is really the line of wisdom. What we want to do as we go through experience, we want to keep pushing the line of wisdom more and more to gaining more courage. With experience, gain more courage, gain more option, and be able to act more on things which we would have earlier accepted. Then we spoke about reality, sense, and perception, where there was this little thing where we said, two people looking at the same picture, one thinks it's a 9, one thinks it's a 6. Who's right? Both are right. Why are they saying different things? The reason is the way they sense it, the angle in which they see it, the filters, the values, beliefs, moral, ethic filters through which they see it. It's not like your filter is right and somebody else's filter is wrong. It's just that we all have different filters. We all have different tints in our glasses. And therefore, when somebody perceives a situation as something else, that's fine, because they are perceiving it through their values, beliefs, morals, and attitude. They are perceiving it through their experiences. They're perceiving through their educational background, and so on. So we should not confuse our perception of a reality with reality itself. What we can have at best in any situation is we can have a perception of the reality. It is almost impossible to know the reality as it is. But we can come as close to the reality as possible if you're able to drop the various barriers, if you're able to drop the tints we have in the glasses which we are wearing. The perception cycle works somewhat like this. First, there is a reality which is out there, and we perceive that reality with either our eyes, nose, ears, whatever, any of our sense organs. And that perception is my truth. I saw it in a certain way. All right? That is my truth. But somewhere we conflate it in our head and start thinking my truth is indeed the fact or the reality. Truth and fact are very different things. Truth is mine. A fact is out there, which is the reality. But we somewhere conflate it in our head and start thinking that it is my truth goes on to become a fact. And that fact becomes my experience, which I store in my memory. And the next time I see a reality, I see it exactly the same way. Just like we saw in the video, we are forming that pathway and we are continuing to harden that pathway and harden the pathway and harden the pathway unless we are able to make the effort to form a new path, unless we are able to perceive things in a slightly different way, right? We will continue to see things exactly the same way they were earlier, and we'll repetitively see that and say, see, this is what I told you, this is how it is happening. Wayne Dyer says that you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. If we are able to change our perception, the reality will change, because we anyway don't see the reality. We only have a perception of our reality. And if we are able to change the way we think, change the way we look at things, then our perception can change, which is about dropping the tint. The other one is, are we able to take in the entirety of what is going on out there? Are we just hearing? Are we listening? Are we just looking? Are we seeing? Right? Are we just putting some food in our mouth? Are we tasting it? So it's all of those things. How intense, how full is our experience? How close to the 100% is our experience when we see, when we hear, when we taste, and so on. And finally, in the last session, we talked about what is called the automatic negative thoughts, a crucially important topic. These are involuntary thoughts. All automatic negative thoughts are involuntary, and we get close to 70,000 thoughts in a day. Many of those thoughts are negative thoughts. Now, as we get those 70,000 thoughts and we allow the negative thoughts to continue to stay in our brain, continue to stay in our mind, what happens? It keeps rotating. I mean, it keeps feeding itself back. We get a negative thought, it just dies down for some time, and then we get it back again, get it back again. It's a bit like every time the same thought comes. It's not like we are collecting more data. It is not like we are going through more experiences. We just started a feedback loop in our head, and that is going round and round and round and round, and suddenly that starts building up into a big colony of ants. And that will lead to negative feelings stay in our body, because feelings, you have a lot of chemicals which are secreted, negative chemicals secreted in our body, and our entire feeling, our entire system is negative, and they stay negative for a very long period of time. At that point in time, we go through an experience. Chances are we will see it more pessimistically. Chances are we will see it more negatively than it what actually is, which all of us will know. When we are going through a bad mood, then we see a certain situation, and then we don't seem to be appreciating as much as our mood. Ultimately, our personality is about our thoughts, our feelings, our attitudes, how we look at our negative thoughts, how we handle our negative thoughts, how we address those negative thoughts is really about what our is. In negative thoughts, we went through a few categories. We won't have time to go through them last fortnight, but just to refresh our memories, the first one is filtering. What do we store in our memory? But we can only store a memory of an experience. The other one is going towards overgeneralization, which is using words like always, never, nothing, everything, and so on and so forth. The more we use such words, just for us to be able to just catch ourselves using words like always, never, everyone, no one, everything, nothing, all of those things automatically will point us in a direction of saying, hey, I seem to be going through the overgeneralization. And a third is thinking without, which is without much data, we have an intuition a project might not work out. That's thinking with our feeling. Guilt thinking and labeling, which is saying things like, I'm a loser, I'm lazy, I'm like this. It's a very defeatist kind of a statement, which is going back to something we might have said at some point in time and feeling guilty about it, and labeling ourselves. and not giving ourselves the permission to lives. Something which might have happened at some point in our life, okay, and feeling guilty about it. And fortune telling without much data again, I know what he is thinking. I know what she is thinking. Okay. We have no idea what they're thinking. Usually when we do mind reading, very rarely we do mind reading where we have positive thoughts, more positive than what we believe in. So we normally, whenever we do mind reading, we realize we'll fear the worst outcome in any meeting. And finally, the two extremely powerful, okay, in a bad way, extremely powerful ants. One is our inability to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions, and looking outside or a way or a reason to explain it out. That's blaming. The other one is inability to take accountability, inability to take ownership of our mistakes where we can defend. Blaming and defending, we can enhance, even if you want to forget everything else, guilt thinking, labeling, mind reading, fortune telling, all or nothing, filtering, all of that. Just remember these two things. Let us take actions, which is getting less and less defensive and less into blaming. Taking accountability is a very important aspect of a good leader. Irrespective of whether things go right or wrong, to be able to stand there and take the responsibility on ourselves is a very, very important characteristic of a leader. And as we become better and better leaders, we have to be dropping blaming and defending as much as possible. Yeah. So ants will impact our life. The back, our history, will think about it with regrets and lost opportunities. I should have done this, I could have become this, and so on. And the current life is unsatisfactory, pessimistic, inadequate, and so on. And our future is full of anxiety and pessimism and everything else. Okay. Now, how do we change? We know this concept, which is called neuroplasticity. How do we make that change happen? That is where the self-awareness and the empowerment increases if we understand our brain and mind a little bit more, which is what we did in one of the sessions, where we have the lower center of our brain, which the habitual mind, which is the manas, which is where the automatic thoughts are coming from. Quick perceptions, overgeneralization, blaming, defending, all of those things are coming from our lower center. Whereas the higher center, a part of the brain which only we have as human beings, the buddhi. Okay, so that part, the higher center, is really our willful mind. It's an effortful part of it. The easy path is to use the lower center, but then if we keep using the lower center, there is no way to evolve and go forward. So really, neurosculpting is only this. It's to slowly chip away at our brain, forming new connection, like we saw in the video, every day, thereby slowly sculpting a new brain and embarking on the journey of evolve. Evolve from what to what, from my current me to a more fulfilled, more purposeful, and a more empowered self. The thing is about me, the tools are about me, the action is myself doing some action with me, not with anybody else. So one of Gandhi's line, which is a beautiful line, is when he was asked, "Aren't you feeling, hurt about something which happened after our independence, Indian independence?" He said, "Nobody can hurt me without my permission, and similarly, nobody can help you evolve without your permission. Therefore, we have to give ourselves the permission to change our values, to change our beliefs, to become more open-minded, to perceive things differently, and to be able to reduce our ants." Right? So neurosculpting is we have the power to evolve. Neurosculpting is our tool to evolve. Neuroplasticity is the concept. Neurosculpting is a tool which you have to evolve. We change ourselves and evolve. It's fairly simple. Okay, it's fairly simple, but it's not easy because it calls for a certain amount of self-aware practice. But as we do that practice more and more, it will become a second nature, and after that, it will become sort of automatic. Accepting non-universality of values, beliefs, morals, and ethics, changing perception, practicing mindfulness, all of that is about neurosculpting. So neurosculpting is about sculpting away our ants. As we find the ant, you sculpt it away, sculpt it away. The core, which is the fully evolved self, is already within us. What we have is we are covered with many layers. We have covered it with various negative layers. Our idea is to just slowly chip away using neuroplasticity, doing the neurosculpting to slowly chip away the ants. And therefore, what we get to is the central core, and which is the evolved being itself. Now, today's session is about an important concept